They have no right to print a pack of lies like that and think they can get away with it.
This feud covers issues that are still relevant today. Freedom of the press versus people's privacy. Carol Burnett is a living entertainment icon, a comedy genius. First appearing on TV in 1955 for the Paul Winchell Show to 2024 at the age of 91, earning an Emmy nomination for Palm Royale. She can comede, she can act, she can dance, she can be friends with Julie Andrews. But her positive reputation was attacked by the National Enquirer, whose salacious headlines and stories finally caught up with them in 1976, when a celebrity army led by the laser-focused Carol Burnett battled them in court, the first time in the newspaper's 28-year history that a libel suit was finally brought to trial. This is Carol Burnett versus fake news. Here's what both were up to until 1976.
Deadly illness has Sammy Davis Jr. fighting for his life? Inquiring minds want to know.
I want to know.
By the late 1970s, the weekly publishing National Enquirer was calling itself America's largest circulated newspaper. Its ethos wasn't covering the darker sides of society, nothing about politics or war, but, keeping things a bit lighter. In 1979, assistant to the National Enquirer president said there is nothing in our paper that an 8-year-old child should not read. They covered topics like the supernatural, human interest stories, and most notably, celebrity gossip. They gathered stories that would appeal to their readers by appealing to the readers themselves, by asking them to submit possible ideas and stories, and if verified, they'd be rewarded financially. The paper, for people like me, does have a great function. It's an escapist newspaper, and escapism is great. You don't want to hear about a country's nuclear capabilities. Sometimes you'd rather just watch Naked Gun. And it is very effective at what it does. I remember going to America as a kid. I was in a grocery store, looked at the row of newspapers and magazines, and the only one that still stays in my memory is of the National Enquirer. It was of an aged Marilyn Monroe, and it said, "I'm still alive, I've been in hiding." I was looking around thinking, why aren't more people bothered with the fact that Marilyn Monroe isn't dead? Obviously now I'm an adult and I'm a lot smarter, and I do hope Marilyn is doing well health-wise.
Better close the window, maybe you're catching cold.
Oh, no, it's all right. It's just an allergy.
Oh, what are you allergic to?
Well, we found out it's something in the air.
What?
Oxygen.
Now, for younger people who don't know who Carol Burnett is, Carol Burnett is like a younger Lucille Ball. Born in 1933, Carol attended Hollywood High School studying theatre and musical comedy. In 1950, she toured around the nightclubs of New York and became a success on Broadway, earning a Tony nomination in 1959. In 1962, she won her first Emmy for The Gary Moore Show. Her career was vastly gaining momentum, and in 1967, she was given The Carol Burnett Show, her own variety comedy sketch series. And this is the show that made her a fully fledged star, with memorable sketches and characters. For over a decade, the show won multiple Golden Globes and Emmys, making her a true national treasure. Her reputation was extremely positive, and you could tell why people felt that she was so lovable. Look at this, for example.
You could be any age you wanted to. What age would you be?
I think 33. Maybe I'll change my mind when I get there.
Her natural warmth and quick wit, it genuinely just radiates through the screen. Despite it being her own show, she didn't have the star ego where she felt that she had to get the best laughs. She would be happy to let any of her co-stars shine. Now, this step is an important part of the timeline. In 1975, she hosted this show.
Hi, I'm Carol Burnett, and I wish I were here just to make you laugh.
Drink, drank, drunk, alongside a young Morgan Freeman.
Nobody ever made anybody else an alcoholic.
That's the youngest I've ever seen Morgan Freeman. This was a very serious show. It highlighted the dangers of alcohol abuse. Carol spoke honestly and earnestly about how it had affected her family.
My mother and father died at the age of 46 because they were both drunks.
And this openness endeared her further to the hearts of the general public. A year later, her lovable persona was put into serious doubt. On January the 26th, 1976, she dined with her husband and friends at the Reeve Gorge restaurant in Washington, where Henry Kissinger was seated at a different table. This all sounds fairly innocuous, doesn't it? But it wasn't. It was the opposite. It was uninnocuous, which is a word that I've just made up. On March the 2nd, 1976, an article in the National Enquirer had the headline, Carroll Burnett and Henry Kay in row. Here is the article that kicked this all off. And when you hear this article, think, would you consider this defamatory? In a Washington restaurant, a boisterous Carroll Burnett had a loud argument with another diner, Henry Kissinger. Then she traipsed around the place, offering everyone a bite of her dessert. But Carroll really raised eyebrows when she accidentally knocked a glass of wine over one diner and started giggling instead of apologizing. The guy wasn't amused and accidentally spilled a glass of water over Carroll's dress. When she saw the article, Carroll was stunned, furious and crying to the point that she started to shake, portraying her as a rude, physically abusive and belligerent drunk. And now it was in print, people may take this as truth. How would she explain this to her friends and family? And above all else, her parents had a history of alcoholism, and this undermined her ability to talk openly about the dangers of drinking.
Somebody says, we heard your mother had a fist fight with Henry Kissinger. I mean, what? Don't do something that's going to hurt my kid. Don't you dare.
Her lawyers contacted the Enquirer, saying that the article was false, libelous and malicious, and demanded a retraction be made. And 2 weeks later, after an internal investigation, the company found they couldn't corroborate their sources. So on April the 6th, 1976, they printed the following retraction. An item in this column on March the 2nd erroneously reported that Carroll Burnett had an argument with Henry Kissinger at a Washington restaurant and became boisterous, disturbing other guests. We understand these events did not occur, and we are sorry for any embarrassment our report may have caused Miss Burnett. But for Carroll, the damage was already done. She described this as being hit by a hit-and-run driver, and when you're laying in hospital, they send you a bouquet of crabgrass. As far as the Enquirer were concerned, they'd done all they needed to do to cover themselves legally. Even aside from the First Amendment, there were statutory protections for newspapers from punitive or general damages when it came to libel. If the newspaper printed a retraction within 21 days of being requested to do so. J. Richard Allison, the corporate secretary for the Enquirer, said the aim of our publication is to present the most accurate story that is possible, and any stories on celebrities must be confirmed by at least 2 sources to make it to print. It was very difficult for a Hollywood celebrity to go through with a lawsuit against a tabloid, as it can take a considerable amount of time and money to even get the case to court. And it's very hard to prove actual malice. Negligence by a newspaper wasn't seen as enough to be classed as malicious. Carroll played it smarter. She filed a $10 million suit in California, where all you had to do was prove that the publication did have access to the truth, but chose to print a lie. Her case was nearly thrown out until several restaurant employees testified under oath that Carroll hadn't behaved in a drunk and disorderly manner. Several times the Enquirer tried to settle the case, but each time Carroll pushed back. No, I don't want to go to trial. You are the bad guys. If this sucker goes for 50 years, I'm going to be there in a rocking chair facing that jury. After seeing Carroll's pursuit of justice, a line of embittered celebrities formed behind her, waiting in the wings to see how it played out. If she succeeded, they would also be suing the publication. Here's a quick summary of other celebrities waiting in the wings to sue. In 1977, Ed McMahon was accused of going to Rome and undergoing a facelift, and while there, he was seen trying to awkwardly hit on a 6'2" model. In my personal opinion, maybe he did have a facelift. This is him in 1976. And this is him in 1978. He does look about 50 years younger. Actor Rory Calhoun was accused of having cancer, meaning that no TV or film production companies would hire him. Now, in the Enquirer's defense, Rory Calhoun, he was close to death because he did die over 20 years later. My spirit animal, Paul Lynde, he was accused of being a mean drunk. To be fair, yeah, that is true.
And you pursued it and pursued it.
7 years.
The main case Carroll needed to prove was actual malice towards her. Did they publish the article knowing that it was false, or in reckless disregard of the truth? The landmark court case began on the 12th of March 1981 with a panel of 12 jurors, 9 needed for a decision. Burnett's attorneys asked prospective jurors questions like, had they ever seen the entertainer on a TV special? Had they ever seen her do something in bad taste? They were also asked whether they'd have qualms about giving a large financial award, and whether they believe celebs had to put up with gossip considering their public figures. Before the trial started, Enquirer's senior staff editor, Hayden Cameron, insisted the tabloid went to great lengths to ensure accuracy. A team of legal researchers specifically employed to check articles for accuracy and removing anything that could be considered slander or libelous. When we make a mistake, we make it before our 20 million readers. We have to try very hard not to make a mistake because we're totally naked in the public eye.
Space aliens giving Earth people messages. Find out in the Enquirer.
The Enquirer's defense was even if the story was incorrect, it didn't matter, it wasn't defamatory, and even if it was, the article had now been retracted. The defense attorney, William Masterson, said, mostly we're dealing with people who've put themselves in the limelight, usually for handsome profit themselves, which works on 2 levels. The argument seemingly being these celebrities put themselves into the public view willingly and are paid very well to do so why is this any different? Also, there's an undertone that celebrities are wealthy attention seekers. Dick Allison, the corporate secretary, insisted every word in their stories are true, and the paper strived for accuracy, requiring everything on tape and verification from 2 or 3 sources. However, staff reporters said their sources were very often bar and waiting staff, and they could be paid up to $500 to give information that would then become an article, which when you think about it can also encourage people to embellish certain stories, especially if you're financially rewarded. If you were at a bus stop on your way to a bar job and you saw Paul Newman get on the bus, then that in itself is quite a boring story, isn't it? So you want to make it a bit more exciting. So you could embellish it by saying something scandalous like when Paul Newman got on the bus, he was wearing sandals with socks. You'd at least consider it.
They have no right to print a pack of lies like that and think they can get away with it.
On March 17th, 1981, an emotional Carroll took to the stand, recounting her childhood with her alcoholic parents and how the Enquirer had ruined any credibility she had to speak of the dangers of drinking. It made her incandescent with rage and sadness. It defamed her, being cast as rude and out of control. She'd had a wonderful, joyous evening, and now she was too afraid about laughing in public places. She was all for the freedom of the press, but the First Amendment shouldn't be an excuse for unethical journalism. The only truth was that, yes, she was at a restaurant with friends, and she indeed did have a conversation with Henry Kissinger, but the conversation was jovial. It wasn't a blazing row. In fact, Henry Kissinger said in a deposition that Carroll acted in a perfectly ladylike fashion, which I'm sure meant the world to her coming from Henry Kissinger. Things were ballsed up when the king of late night, Johnny Carson, put this entire case at risk by doing this.
So I'm going to call the National Enquirer and the people who wrote this liars. Now that's slander. They can sue me for slander. You know where I am, gentlemen?
And then he went back to stroking puppies. Hours after Carroll took to the witness stand during his Tonight Show, he used it as an opportunity to lay the boot in, denouncing the Enquirer article, speculating that his 3rd marriage was ending. This wasn't helpful at all to Carroll's case. Carson was the most powerful man in television and on one of the most highly watched shows in the country. The jurors may well have seen that episode, and how could they not be influenced? The Enquirer's lawyer, William Masterson, demanded a mistrial. That Carson's attack was prejudicial and damaged the Enquirer's chance at a fair trial. The judge denied the motion to dismiss the case, though 2 jurors were heard discussing Carson's remarks and dismissed, having an alternate juror replace one of them. But fortunately for him, the Enquirer dug their own grave. When it came to the retraction, editor Ian Calder insisted not to use a headline like correction, as it would be a turn-off. We felt people wouldn't read an article that said retraction or correction, instead putting the retraction under the headline $6 million man blows bionic fuse, which, to be fair, I think I'd be more likely to read. But after Carroll's lawyer showed him evidence of a correction headline regarding actress Dihanne Carroll, he admitted some retractions of articles are given headlines, which at this point makes you consider why they did this. Was it because they wanted Carroll's retraction to go unnoticed? Seems a little malicious.
Steve Tinney, the writer's name linked with the article, said he didn't trust the source of the information, and a senior editor had in fact written the article, not him. Another reporter testified that his editor had insisted on running the story despite a lack of any proof.
But the judge ruled that the Enquirer is a magazine.
However, out of nowhere, on March the 18th, after considering a multitude of evidence, Judge Peter Smith declared the newspaper as a magazine, thus not afforded the same protections. It was classified by the Audit Bureau of Circulation as a magazine, and it didn't operate with the same structures as a newspaper company. A senior editor stated, "We are not a newspaper," and it was designated as a magazine in 6 different mass media directories.
Meaning in legal terms, they were fucked.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find for the plaintiff, Carroll Burnett.
On the 23rd of March 1981, Judge Smith sent the 11-member Los Angeles jury away to deliberate, considering the following: an article which is only unpleasant or embarrassing to the plaintiff but does not hold her up to ridicule is not libelous. The jury must be convinced the National Enquirer acted with malice. The jury deliberated for more than 2 days after a week-long trial, and on March the 26th, 1981, the result was in. They voted unanimously to award Miss Burnett $300,000 in general damages and $1.3 million in punitive damages, after ruling that the weekly tabloid had printed false, defamatory information about Miss Burnett with the knowledge that it was false. The amount of money awarded was the magazine's estimated net profit for a year. After 2 later appeals by the magazine, the amount was reduced to an agreement of an undisclosed sum. But for an emotional Carol Burnett, it wasn't about the money, saying, "If they'd given me $1 plus car fare, I'd have been happy, because it was the principle. They didn't give a darn about my rights as a human being. I didn't do a thing to the National Enquirer, they did it to themselves." She then used the money to create the Carol Burnett Fund for Responsible Journalism at the University of Hawaii to support ethical standards and professionalism in journalism.
Carroll had the time and financial resources to battle the National Enquirer, a watershed moment that led to immediate filings by other celebrities. Despite her concern, her reputation was kept fully intact and has continued to be lauded and beloved by both the general public and her co-stars over 7 decades. And even though over the years the National Enquirer has still continued to be sued at certain points, it still made them and other publications at least think twice about what they publish. There's only one way to end this, isn't there?